Okay. Hello, dear colleagues. I do hope that you can hear me and you can see me. That we'll be able to interact during our session. So please, if I ask you to write something down in the chat or just give any of your ideas, please do so so that we could benefit from this time as much as possible. As I have the chat and your questions on my mobile phone, so from time to time I'll be looking there, which might look a little bit strange. Our topic for today will be mediation in teaching English, and in teaching English specifically as lingua franca, which has become quite a popular concept today. Today we have actually a variety of approaches, a variety of concepts as for teaching English, as for learning English, etc. Before we actually proceed to our topic, and before we start speaking about some ideas that, we could probably use in our teaching and in our lessons to ensure that kind of mediation, I'd like you to put in the chat just to check our connection. What do you think? What is mediation in teaching English? What is that? What do you know about it? Maybe where that concept originated from? Any of your ideas. Anything that you might think of. And, if you have any, any ideas how to implement it, or maybe you are already implementing it, you are most welcome to share your ideas with the colleagues and maybe to enrich our understanding of what mediation is as such. Okay, great. So we have using media in lessons. Great, right? Yeah, this is kind of important today, and probably no lesson can go by without using any media. Right. Anything else that you can think of? I do hope that actually everybody kind of has some kind of an idea of that. And using English, we have using English as a common language by speakers who are different, whose native languages are different. Good. Right. And that is actually it. And this is the thing that we are going to talk about today. Yeah, it's using interactive materials. Great. So, just to give you brief information about me and what I'm doing. I'm an associate professor at Kavazin University. So I teach mostly to adults, but also to teens. And that is why I am really interested in teaching English as lingua franca. And probably, some of you already mentioned that idea that today, really, English is no longer what it used to be, and it is used in many instances. It is used by non-native speakers and not native speakers, and for that reason, what I'm going to talk today is sort of a new aspect of the CFR scale that we know well, and our agenda for today would be mediation according to the Council of Europe, and how this concept is viewed within the CFR scale as such. And then we'll look at different types of mediation in teaching English, and maybe some ideas how we could help our students to become more efficient mediators. Actually, the term of mediation has been circulating in the documentation of the European Council for quite a long time already. But officially, it was introduced, I think, like in 2001 it was introduced for the first time, but as a criterion officially, it was implemented in 2018. And it was actually introduced as one of the criteria of language mastery, together with the traditional reading, writing, listening skills, speaking skills, etc. But strangely, it hasn't received as much coverage in the field of language teaching in itself yet. Possibly, well, on the one hand, it is sort of obvious that as teachers, we realize that it is essential, and not just like essential, but it's the purpose of language learning to turn our students into effective mediators, into effective communicators, etc. Still, I'd like to revisit this concept and maybe suggest some things that we could introduce in our lessons. Not to change the content as such, not to change the ways we used to teach, not to change the materials, because, well, very frequently they are quite fixed for us. But there are some things and some components that we could use to kind of reinforce the aspect of mediation in our classrooms and make our students really effective mediators and, well, essentially it means communicators. First of all, I'd like to, introduce the concept of mediation as it is used by the European Council. It's, well, of course, mediation can apply to various media, meaning interaction with different technologies, etc. But according to the European Council and according to the CFAR scale, actually the concept that is used in the CFAR scale, mediation is a social and cultural process of creating conditions for communication and cooperation, despite all the difficulties that might arise in the process. So basically, it refers to a situation when the learner, or basically the user of the language, acts as a social agent who creates bridges and helps to construct knowledge and convey meanings. Mediation, it's not another skill that we need to add to the traditional skills that we already teach quite successfully. Rather, mediation is a way of kind of exploiting speaking, listening, reading, writing, all of those skills in order to create bridges and connections between people, between content, and function effectively in the ever-changing world. The concept of mediation was kind of introduced due to a global understanding that language is no longer an art which must be mastered to perfection. Rather, it is, kind of a tool that we use in everyday life to achieve sort of a result. And basically, this is learning English as lingua franca, as a language of international communication. And the goal here is to make yourself understood, not to speak perfect English. It's about being intelligible rather than being accurate. And I'd like to illustrate that with a very short extract from a TED Talk, which maybe you have already seen, but it quite clearly demonstrates, this perception of the English language as a tool and as actually one more way to pursue our goals and to achieve them.
If we listen to every conversation in English on planet Earth right now, we would notice that 96% of those conversations involved non-native English speakers. Only 4% of those conversations Our native speaker to native speaker, this is not my language anymore. This language belongs to you. It's not an art to be mastered. It's just a tool to use to get a result. And I want to give you a real life example of what English is today in the world, real English today. This is another true story. I was at a barbecue a little while ago. This was a barbecue for engineers from all over the world. And they were making hot dogs. Now, some of the hot dogs were regular hot dogs, and some were these cheese hot dogs, you know, with the cheese in the middle. French engineer is cooking the hot dogs, and he turns to this Korean engineer and he says, would you like a hot dog? And the Korean guy says, yes, please. He says, do you want the cheese? And the Korean guy looks around at the table. He says, I no see cheese. French guy says, the hot dog contains the cheese. Korean guy doesn't understand him, right? So the French engineer tries again. The hot dog is making from with the cheese. Korean guy still doesn't understand. He tries again. He says, the hot dog is coming from, no, the cheese is coming from the hot dog. Korean guy cannot understand. Now this Japanese engineer who's been listening to this conversation turns to the Korean engineer and he says, cheese integrator. He understands, okay? Everybody understands. So this is what English is today. It's just a tool to play around with to get a result, like a computer game.
Okay, well, possibly you've already seen this video, or at least heard the idea, like that English now is no longer kind of an art, but it's what we use to do our jobs, to interact with people throughout the world, to travel, etc. And sometimes it doesn't matter how accurate we are. And still, in our classrooms, only too frequently, we focus on accuracy. We evaluate our students on their accuracy and not on the fact that they can communicate their message, even if it's not that accurate, even if it contains mistakes. And this change of perspective actually requires us to modify our behavior in class. It's not really about changing the activities, though maybe that too. But it is about our instructions, about our feedback, about the guidance throughout an activity that we need to kind of modify. And to suggest some of the things that we could consider, I'll actually use the classification provided by the Council of Europe, namely, mediating a text, mediating concepts, mediating communication. All of those aspects are combined to describe an efficient communicator, an efficient mediator. The first type of mediation involves, passing on the context of a text. The context and the content for a variety of reasons. It can be because people do not have access, for example, for linguistic reasons, cultural reasons, or technical reasons, to a certain text. Or, basically transferring the content to start a discussion, for example. And text here means both written text and, oral text, so the text that we hear. And within this category, there are the following types of mediation activities, such as note-taking, relaying information, explaining data, expressing response to creative text, but actually it can be even about any text, not only creative text. And of course, reading and listening, they constitute an integral part of any course book. However, in really many cases, we put more emphasis on whether the students understand what they read or what they listened to. Even the skimming exercises that are kind of good for this purpose but there the tasks are often built in the way that requires students to, develop the ability to not to quickly grab the general idea of the text, but to look for some specific information in the text without actually maybe totally understanding the general point of like this piece of oral text, written text, doesn't matter. And in that way, we actually do not teach our students to work with the text, to give some kind of continuation to that material. We use questions, we use true-false exercises, etc. Which is great, because we need to understand whether the students actually see what the text is about. And of course, this is necessary. But we do not give them the space to analyze the text, to maybe summarize it verbally, or in a visual form, for that matter, to put it, on a mind map, or on a slides, or use any means of graphic organization of data, for example. Not so often we ask them to express their opinion about the content, challenge any of the ideas that they encounter in this text. And these are the things that are most suitable to get the result, to make students really efficient mediators and efficient communicators, because this is something that we do in the real world. We do not just read, in most cases, we do not read just for the sake of reading. We do not listen just for the sake of listening. We read a text, or we listen to a text in order to do something about it. Maybe to tell about it, to tell somebody about it. Maybe to express our ideas or our criticism about it. Maybe to use it in kind of a business context, to present this idea to your colleagues in some way. It really depends, but to read or listen just for the point of listening and reading, it doesn't work. And for that purpose, there is not much to change to the materials that we use, because it depends on the age, it depends on the level of the students, etc. But these are just some things that we could do spontaneously. We could just read a text, check understanding, and then ask the students to speak on the text, or to visualize the text if it's some kind of a classification or something, to create a mind map, to create a diagram, to explain the meaning of the text to their colleagues. And here, what is already good is jigsaw reading or listening. So it performs pretty well this function, because it gives space for some real communication, as it works as sort of an information gap, basically. It gives the reason to communicate, to speak, but also to listen, and to organize information in the way that the other person actually has the reason to listen to this piece of information. And therefore, when the students realize and really get into the habit of being asked all those things, all those questions, when they realize that teachers are interested in their ideas about the text, when what they consider relevant or secondary, what they agree or disagree with, which information they might find contradictory, they will get also in the habit of thinking critically. And they will also be motivated to read, because they will see it as a topic for discussion. And this is something, this purpose of reading or listening, it must be the key point both of our instructions and our feedback. And at the very beginning, we must tell our students that we read not just to read, not just to understand, but we want to discuss a topic, or we want to produce some poster on the basis of the data, whatever. So that actually our students didn't see it as a task, but saw it as the starting point for something else, for a project, for a debate, for whatever that might be. As for the next component, which is mediating concepts. Well, according to the CFR, concepts are mediated when students collaborate. So you can see that there are several categories, several points, but essentially all of them are about collaboration on the basis of the content. So to some extent, probably this category can be considered as like the logical outcome of interacting with texts, because it deals with collaborating on the basis of some content to get, well, sort of a result. Well, these skills, they're not purely linguistic in nature. Of course, well, obviously we need language to manage those situations, but we also need a kind of emotional intelligence. We need the ability to find common ground, to ensure equal participation in the group, for instance. We need to remain goal-oriented and remember like why we actually speak about it. And what could come in handy here, again, actually this is something that we do in any productive task. Yeah, so it's not something kind of new. And of course, first of all, we need to use a lot of group work and pair work, which is, again, nothing new. But we could also modify our feedback, because certainly, normally we give feedback on what? We give feedback on accuracy, yeah, on language accuracy. We provide some better ways of expressing some ideas. But at the same time, we should also mention, well, for example, the group dynamics, whether they managed to get everybody talking, whether they were really listening to the ideas of each other, whether they were helping each other with the language, even if it's possible, if like there is one common language in the classroom, and even if not. Yeah, because like sometimes they could really help each other just to express the idea better, clearer, etc. If there was a clear-cut outcome to the group work, like, I don't know, some kind of a ranking or like a solution to the problem or whatever, you could also give feedback on the quality of the product. Not like the linguistic part of it, but the quality, let's say, of the idea. The quality of of the presentation of that idea, again, structurally, from the point of view of content, not from the point of view of language. It shouldn't be like, it mustn't be about criticism, but just some things that they could improve and how they could adjust their interaction to actually streamline the conversation, to show them that how their discussion could go better. Maybe this can be something about assigning roles differently. Maybe it can be about sources of information that they use, if appropriate. Yeah, if, for example, this is some kind of a project, yeah, and they're more or less free in the choice of the information that they use, that they look for. It's very much content dependent and context dependent as well. But again, in this way, students learn that, well, communication is much more than just language, that they need to collaborate with other people, and this is key, not the language. Sometimes language is, well, it is essential, but sometimes even knowing the language and speaking it perfectly doesn't really yield a result. Sometimes communication is about getting your message across, yeah, like as what we've seen in the video. Yeah, the language is pretty much incorrect, and still everybody understands. Sometimes it is about the way to tackle the problem. Sometimes it is about, well, actually getting the right way to speak about the problem even. Sometimes it's about not even speaking, but active listening and showing that, well, that you're interested, that you're not indifferent to the topic for that matter. Sometimes it's about being tactful enough to change the subject when you understand that, well, something is kind of wrong. And if you're unable to do that, actually, like, your language level pretty much doesn't matter. What we've seen in this extract from the TED Talk, and the engineer, who said, choose integrator. We do not know his real level, maybe he was C1. But he did what was necessary to ensure communication in that moment. He was focused not on himself, not on the accuracy of his language, but on the other person, and the person who was lost, and with whom he didn't have like one common language. So for him, the only way was to adapt the language to the person in front of him. And basically, if you have the result, it doesn't matter much whether you're correct, incorrect, whether you follow some, stylistic conventions, whatever. It's just about getting your message across. And of course, maybe the highest level of mediation is mediating communication. Mediating communication is, kind of similar to mediating concepts, but it also has a cultural dimension to it. The aim of mediating communication is to facilitate understanding between people of different individual, sociocultural, intellectual, maybe backgrounds. And a person who acts as an effective mediator of communication will actually create some kind of a safe space for the people to communicate, not to feel judged, to find opportunities to make compromise, etc. And of course, misunderstandings do happen even without like different representatives of different cultures. But this dimension of mediation mostly includes sensitivity to various perspectives, culture-specific or not, depends, and focuses on misunderstandings, avoiding those misunderstandings, resolving them when necessary. Essentially, we cannot be ready for any possible situation that we might need to resolve in our communication, everyday communication or business communication. It doesn't matter much. But it is also good to provide students with ample examples of, sometimes we call them critical incidents. To include as many of those critical incidents in our lessons as possible. And by showing a certain situation, we may just ask them, like, what's wrong here in this communication? Or maybe nothing is wrong. What could be done better? Or maybe it's okay like that. And only too frequently, those misunderstandings result not from the language, or not only from the language at least. Here, for example, you can see a situation, just an ordinary situation. A manager, a Belgian manager who's working in Thailand, isn't happy with his assistant because, the assistant is often late. And one day he tells her off in front of other employees. And soon after, she resigns. You could just provide your students with such examples. And most probably, at least if these are not like business English students who travel a lot, who interact internationally a lot, it won't be that obvious to them what actually happened. Okay, you're late. Sometimes your boss expresses his or her dissatisfaction with the fact, but why would you resign? And this is actually the question that you could ask your students, what happened here? Why do you think she resigned? And of course, you might get some answers the person is just oversensitive to criticism or something. But essentially, it's not only that. And The problem is that in some cultures, it's not acceptable to criticize someone in public. And it is crucial to allow the person to save face, so to say. And this is the reason why the woman resigned. Was the manager unclear? Well, kind of not. Did he lack, I don't know, some kind of sensitivity, some kind of, I don't know, maybe was he untactful? No, probably not. But the very fact, that he told her off in public in front of her colleagues made her resign. Here, the problem is not the language. Not at all. It is just the fact that, he did it in the wrong place at the wrong time. One more situation that could serve as an example of such a critical incident could be shown in one video. Maybe you know it, maybe you use it. And I'd like you to watch it. And drop in the chat, what do you think went wrong and what could be done better? Just any of your ideas.
On a vacation last year. Great memories. What about your family? Are your parents in the same field as you, the healthcare business?
No. Dad's a professor. Mum worked various jobs, but she's basically retired now. Can we move to the diabsence?
Which university?
Excuse me?
Your father, the professor, which university is he at?
Warsaw. The Chopin University of Music.
Ah, Chopin University. That's not too far from the National Museum. I know Warsaw well. It's one of the world's great capital cities.
I'm very fond of the place too. Anyway, the diabsence.
There'll be plenty of time for that later. Remind me, what's the name of that really tall building in the middle of Warsaw? I went to a trade fair there once, many years ago. Alô? Tchau, tchau. Obrigado novamente. Tchau.
Is this a good moment to start talking about the diabsence?
Relax. We'll come to that later. Back to that tall building. Do you know the one I mean?
The Palace of Culture and Science?
The Palace, that's it. That reminds me, I met Jessica Scott there for the first time. What was the event again? I think I still have a program somewhere around here. Do you want to see it? And don't worry, we'll get to the diabsence in a moment.
Matteo, I really think we should get to the diabsence now. We don't have long to talk.
If you insist, fine. I just thought you would be interested in the program, that's all. Before I forget, tell me again why Daniel couldn't come.
Wow. We certainly had very different approaches. In the end, Matteo seemed a little unhappy when I took control of the conversation. I tried again and again to bring him back to the diabsence, but he wanted to talk about other subjects. I see what Alex meant about multitasking.
Okay. Well. So we already have some answers. So, inappropriate behavior, during the meeting. Yeah, definitely. Inappropriate how? We definitely see that in the end, the man kind of gets irritated and, he's dissatisfied with the behavior of his colleague. But what went wrong, in your opinion? What could be done better, potentially? Do you have any of the ideas? the fallacy of time, great. Yeah, he didn't respect her time, right? So yeah, there is some kind of, yeah, like challenge in terms of, well, time management and maybe attitudes to time, right? Yeah, and possibly, yeah, it could be considered as like not very business-like approach, definitely, yeah. So he seems like not to respect her time on the one hand, yeah. He's too personal, yeah, it might seem that, yeah, that he's like too personal with her. He asks a lot of personal questions without like really knowing her, possibly. But essentially, yeah, great. So these are like different approaches to communication in like the conversation in the business context, etc. Yeah, so we kind of understand clearly that these are like both of them are business people that are supposed to discuss some kind of, well, a project, yeah, some kind of type sense or whatever that might be. But they have like very different kind of attitudes to time and to business in general, probably, yeah. And while he thinks that it's okay, yeah, like to ask a lot of personal questions, to really to answer your phone when you are talking to like, well, to your colleague, and essentially, yeah, this might be kind of a situation where, again, both of them, well, they are not native speakers. I think she's Polish and he's Argentinian or something like that. Yeah, so the language is not a problem, and, well, still the communication fails for some reason. And it is really crucial to, well, to get our students to understand that actually the language, it's, well, it's only part of the communication process. And if we get them to analyze those critical incidents, a variety of situations like this, that, well, these are taken from the business context, okay, but such misunderstandings can be, well, can be observed anywhere. They can deal with, I don't know, like some common gestures, for example. Yeah, like even, I suppose, well, the summed up sign, I have an impression that it's it can be interpreted differently in various cultures, and in some cultures it is offensive. And, well, in some cultures you can actually, well, you can be arrested for doing that. These are things that students must be aware of. Like, and it's not about teaching them like all the possible, I don't know, all the possible cultural differences. Because, like, well, it's impossible, you never know where, like, what kind of cultures they will encounter and everything, and it's not about that. It's actually about sensibilizing them to the differences that might arise in communication. The differences, like, well, broadly speaking, they might be cultural, they might be just personal, they might be related to, well, to some family values, to some values of the specific company where the person works, to the background, to some, like, well, probably not a good way to put it, but to some intellectual background as well. Meaning if like the people from two different fields encounter encounter problems while communicating, just because they have different professional backgrounds. And if they have to work on, for example, on the same project for some reason, they will need to adapt their communication. And again, this adaptation will be focused not on making your language perfect, not on making your language, well, let's say, well, kind of very technical and very academic and I don't know what, yeah? So this is, well, actually, this will require quite the opposite. This will require simplifying the terms. This will require, maybe explaining the same thing several times in different ways for the other person to actually get it. And this is something that they must be ready to do and they must be aware that, language is pretty flexible, actually, and they are supposed to use it quite flexibly. I pretty much like one quote by one of the educators, which says that in a good language lesson, students should learn 3 things: something about the language, something about the world, and something about themselves. And for me, it's kind of key for language teaching and for language learning. Language lessons, they provide a perfect environment for developing communicators. Like in the world of today, it's impossible not to interact with other people in one way or another, to a different extent, in a different scope, but still communication now is key. And probably this is one of the reasons why mediation was introduced as one of the criteria of language mastery, because it's an umbrella term for reading, writing, and everything, but on the other hand, it shows essentially why we use that, why we learn that, because we need to actually interact with other people. And for that, we need to know something about the world, something about, the topic that we will speak about, for whatever reason that might be. We need to actually be able to communicate our message effectively from the point of view, not from the point of view of language, of course, but also from the point of view of clarity, even from the point of view of the choice that we make every time when we actually choose the medium to communicate this information. This is something that you've actually mentioned, at the beginning of the session, that sometimes it's essential to understand your audience and understand how to communicate this message. Whether it will be most appropriate to do that, in the form of a presentation, whether it would be better to use some visuals, if the information is complicated or not that much, whether it's appropriate to kind of add some kind of your, not opinion, but kind of your attitude towards that information, or you shouldn't, and it will be perceived as, biased or something. It's also the knowledge of the culture, and not even the culture from the point of view of some cultural differences, but the culture, the global culture. That now we need to interact effectively with different people, people from very different backgrounds, and we need to understand how to do that, proceeding from our own personalities, proceeding from our ways to communicate. And for that reason, it is also a good idea to make our learners aware of, let's say, their own personality, of course, but also their communication style, and how they could adapt it, how they could develop that kind of emotional intelligence, and just know what you want to say, but also whether it's appropriate to say that in that moment to that person, etc. How they can confront a person without offending them, without seeming rude, and still without creating the conflict, but still reach the goal and show that you have a different point of view, and it might be right or it might be complementary to the point of view of another person. And all of those things, they not very often, unfortunately, they are learned in classrooms. For some reason, we kind of it's probably just kind of our history and history of the educational system itself. We are used to giving the students, let's say, facts. we provide them with some information that they need to remember and to memorize. But probably now, considering that there is a huge amount of information out there, we need to teach them how to deal with all of that information, and primarily how to deal with people through this information. And only in that case, probably, they will be able to, well, to become mediators between themselves and the world and other people, between knowledge and, again, other people, where in the context where they need to transfer that knowledge or explain that knowledge or whatever that may be. And well, this is probably the main idea that is inherent, I would say, in the concept of mediation. We never communicate with the void. We never use language just for the purpose of using language. And the only purpose, the only reason why we do that, why we say whatever we say, is to achieve some kind of a result. It can be a business result. It can be just, well, provoking some emotions in your audience. It can be whatever. But mediation is just about making the person see the language as the tool to do something, and not as just an artistic practice in itself. Thank you very much for your attention and for attending this webinar and the wonderful conference. Well, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. You can just drop them in the chat, any of your comments, questions, maybe any of your experiences. Oh, I think I have some question about how I can find this video on the internet. You mean the video about, well, the first video or the critical incident? Because if it is the critical incident, then, well, this meeting, yeah. Then it is one of the videos that is used for Business Partner B1, the course which is Business Partner B1. And the TED video, it's called something like learning the language as if you're playing a video game, or kind of this. And actually, as for well, as for the business result, it's not business partner, sorry, business partner book, there are a lot of like scenarios there with the so-called critical incidents, with a lot of like different scenarios of the same situation. One which is like usually good, the other that is not so good, and they're like really, there are like comparisons given by experts, and the videos, they can be used not only like, yeah, they are meant for the business context, but they are not only for that. So like a lot of them can be used in pretty general contexts. Well, for adults probably, yeah, not for children, but still like not even in business settings. Okay, well, we have one more question. What is the most suitable program for learning English from the beginning? I don't really get the question. What do you mean, program and learning from the beginning? What kind of students do you have in mind? Like adults or like teens, young learners? And what is meant by the program? Because, well, program is kind of a broad notion. Maybe you could specify that a little bit. I guess, well, if these are course books, then there is like a wide variety of those. If, well, for the beginning, well, for the beginners, I don't work with young learners, but as for the rest, I would just say that it's providing them like with language, I mean, like sort of drilling. It's not really drilling, but just to exposing them to as much language as possible, and make them really memorize, well, it's like in inverted commas, but still memorize some things without trying to understand them at the deep level, just because, well, they won't be able to. And at low levels, it's not necessary, this understanding, it will come later, when they will be already well, using those phrases pretty, like, well, pretty freely, let's put it that way. But, well, as for the adults who don't know the language, that's kind of interesting because, well, I don't know why, but, well, from my experience, I have rarely seen adults who were like really beginners. I mean, most of them, they're false beginners actually. They, like now people are, they know, they are seeing English everywhere. And I don't know, in the names of the shops, on, you know, their inscriptions on the t-shirts, whatever. There is so much language in there that they might not realize that. But they're not like really, like normally they are not really beginners. And they're actually, learning can go pretty quickly, I would say. It will go pretty quickly because they will realize that and they will kind of remember. And that's why they will be able to produce some language very, very quickly. It will be something like cheese integrator. Yeah, so it will be something like very, very incoherent and grammatically wrong. But there, like, you could use, well, you could use a variety of books. Yeah, you could use anything, but try, well, I would suggest just trying, like, making them realize that they know much more than they think they know. And they can use these, like, phrases and words, separate phrases and words that they know, to piece it all together. I would say that. I'm not sure that I gave actually a coherent answer to your question, but... well, as for, is it possible to interact with the student while he's speaking in order to correct mistakes? That's a tricky question. And I would say that kind of, yes. I don't mean like interrupting in the, like in the middle of the phrase, of course not. That's just like impolite and, well... but I would say that when you have heard some kind of, well, a coherent idea, yeah, and you understand that you can stop, well, stop the person without really interrupting, you should, because, well, this kind of clashes with some traditional views of mistake correction. But the problem is that when a person, well, speaks for some time, and then you, even if you like take notes of the mistakes that he or she has done, the person has actually forgotten already where they made those mistakes. And that's why even if you correct them, like they won't remember, they won't actually build any connection between what you correct and what, well, what they said at that moment. So I'd say that yes, like not like in every sentence, like not, well, some mistakes that shouldn't be just corrected. Yeah, like if they are intelligible, it's okay. But if you really want to correct something, like probably it's just up to you to choose the moment when you can stop the person so that he or she really remembered what he or she said. Because otherwise it's just like mistake correction that doesn't lead to anything, I would say. Okay, interesting question. What courses for teens would you recommend? Well, for teens, well, mostly I work with teens who are preparing for some kind of exams. But what works pretty well, I'd say that it's Gold. It's more, I'd say that it's more exam-oriented, but pretty general at the same time. The same goes for Focus. Maybe as well, what for teens, High Note. High Note is pretty well, it's pretty like, well, it's working well, really. These are just, it's not like for, let's say, young teens, yeah, but for like, I don't know, like 8th form, 9th form, etc. It works pretty well. And the courses such as, for example, Gold or Focus, they help to prepare students for exams when there is no rush, sort of, yet. Yeah, well, it's not like the 11th form, and well, it's kind of difficult to catch up on everything at once. So that's another possibility. Even some courses like I don't know, like Total English or something like this, they could be used for for teens. Maybe not all topics, but they can be used. In my opinion, actually, when I work with students, I try to mix a little bit of everything. I like to mix a little bit of everything just to choose the topics that are more like suitable for the students, etc., and to the gaps of knowledge that they have actually. Yeah, gold focus. Yeah, high note. Yeah, so something like that could be good. All right. Well, do we have any other questions? And thank you very much for your attention, for listening. Hopefully it was like at least a little bit useful for you. And basically, yeah, like I think that at the website of the Council of Europe and the CFR, any CFR sites, you can find the detailed the digitalization of the requirements. Like, yes, we have them for reading, writing, speaking, etc. But there are also like requirements and expectations for each level in terms of mediation. Yeah, like what it means to to reach a certain level in terms of mediation. And there you'll see that, well, I haven't spoken about it today because like I just don't have time. It'll take ages actually, but you can find that scale, and it's pretty interesting to see how the perspective changes there, and like what students are expected to do in terms of communication, and not just like producing separate phrases, let's put it that way. Okay, well, I think we have no more questions. So thank you very much. And well, I hope that this kind of tips could be useful in your classrooms. And maybe they will change a little bit the sort of the perspective of our feedback primarily, of what we show our students and what we expect from them primarily. And like that realization could be pretty useful and pretty helpful for them to see that they're not seen as just like, I don't know, robots that are supposed to remember things without challenging them, I'd say. Okay, well, thank you very much for this wonderful evening, and well, have a nice day, and pretty much hope that our lessons will, well, I really do hope that this perspective for mediation and like the need for mediation in English classrooms will really reinforce our understanding and our review of English really as lingua franca. So thank you very much and goodbye.